They told me I was chosen because I was blessed. That's the word Sister Bernadette used, her voice trembling as she held the red envelope in both hands. She handed it to me like it contained a miracle. But when I broke the Vatican seal and unfolded the letter, I didn't feel blessed. I felt hunted. My name is Luca. I grew up in a Catholic orphanage outside Turin. Most kids like me were forgotten by the world, lost in the church's back rooms. But every year, one of us was chosen by the Vatican itself. No one knew why. Some said it was for a scholarship. Others whispered of secret missions. But every chosen child disappeared. No letters, no visits, no trace. And now it was my turn. 2 men in long black cassocks came the next morning. They didn't speak. They wore red rings and had symbols embroidered near their collars. Unfamiliar, ancient. Not crosses. Something older. One of them had a satchel lined with lead and locked shut with 3 keys. When I asked what was inside, he said it was a measure of faith. The car they brought had tinted windows and no plates. I wasn't allowed to bring anything. Not even the rosary I kept under my pillow. The nuns cried as I left. Not loud sobs, but the kind of weeping you do when you're burying something. We drove through Rome without stopping. No churches. No prayers, just an endless silence thick with pressure. When we arrived at the Vatican, they didn't take me through the main gate. We entered through a service tunnel beneath St. Peter's. The walls were lined with cracked limestone and faded frescoes. Scenes of fire, winged creatures, blindfolded priests. One of the men finally spoke. He said, "What lies beneath is older than the church itself. Remember that." We reached a bronze door sealed with molten wax and 3 embedded seals, the triquetra, the eye of St. Cyprian, and a symbol I'd never seen before. A serpent curled into a spiral, biting its tail. They lit candles, chanted in Latin, and opened the vault. It didn't creak. It hissed. A staircase spiraled down into darkness. As I descended, something in the air changed. My skin tightened. My breath felt heavier. There was a smell, not of rot, but of dust that had never moved. Below, at the bottom of the stone shaft, stood a second door. Simple wood, reinforced with iron and marked with blood. Carved above it were the words, "Omnis innocentia penditur." All innocence must be weighed. They opened the door, and for the first time I heard it. Not a sound. A hum. Faint, like a heartbeat inside the stone. And then the door closed behind me. I was inside the vault. The first thing I noticed inside the vault was that the air moved not like wind, but like breath. The space itself inhaled and exhaled, softly, rhythmically, as if the stone walls had lungs. The floor was smooth obsidian, reflecting the faint torchlight that clung to the chamber's edge like frightened ghosts. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was oppressive. It felt like a pause before something unspeakable. The door behind me had no handle from the inside. I walked forward, hesitant, each step echoing with unnatural clarity. The hallway stretched longer than it should have. I turned corners that looped back onto themselves, past frescoes that changed slightly each time I looked. In one, a boy knelt before a horned statue. In another, the same boy was gone, replaced by ash. I called out. My voice sounded muffled, as though the walls were absorbing it. At the end of the corridor, I found the Chamber of Names. It was circular, like a dome, with vaulted ceilings and a massive pillar in the center. Along the curved walls were hundreds, maybe thousands, of names etched into black stone. Each was written in Latin, followed by a date and a strange red sigil beside it. Some names were ancient, written in crumbling script. Others looked newer. I found a few from the last decade, including a girl named Maria V., dated 5 years before. Then I found my name, Luca F. 2025, and beneath it, a blank space. The pillar at the center of the room pulsed with a dim, golden light. As I approached it, my fingers tingled, and the air thickened with a metallic scent. Copper, maybe blood. The surface of the pillar had indentations, almost like fingerprints worn into the stone over time. I placed my hand on it. Instantly, the room shuddered. The sigils beside every name flared red. A low sound began to rise, something between a chant and a scream. I staggered back, but my feet wouldn't move. My hand was stuck to the stone. The golden light flared, and I saw images. Flashes burned into my mind. Children screaming behind wooden doors. Vatican priests in ceremonial robes standing in a circle. A pit of fire surrounded by salt. A horn statue carved from bone. And then I saw something worse. A child, barely older than me, being swallowed by the pillar itself, body turning to ash as priests chanted in ecstasy. I screamed and pulled away. The room fell silent. The light died. My hand was bleeding. And then I heard a voice. Not from the walls. Not in my ears. Inside my mind. It said, "You are not the first. You will not be the last. But you are different." The walls rippled like water. One of the names erased itself. And a new doorway opened in the stone. I hesitated at the threshold of the new passage. It hadn't been there when I entered the chamber of names. The stone had parted silently, as though it had been waiting for me, or someone like me, to unlock it. The air seeping out was colder, older. Not like the musty chill of catacombs. This was deeper, hungrier. I stepped forward. The corridor beyond the door was unlike anything in the Vatican's known architecture. The walls were not made of brick or marble, but of something dark and fibrous, like ancient tree roots petrified into place. They pulsed subtly, as if reacting to my presence. It wasn't just a hallway, it was a throat, and I was walking into it. Along the walls, Latin verses were scratched in with fingernails or claws. They weren't etched by any tools. One I translated in my head without knowing how. He who remembers awakens him. I didn't know who he was, but every part of me screamed not to find out. Eventually, the passage widened into another room, smaller than the last but suffocating in its intensity. Candles burned on their own, affixed to the walls with blood. In the center of the room was a chair, wooden, splintered, with old leather straps hanging loosely. A rusted bowl sat at its base. There were bones in the bowl, small ones. A single book rested on a pedestal beside the chair. Its cover was human skin, dry, cracked, and stitched. I felt my stomach churn as I realized the stitching wasn't decorative. It was sealing something inside. I opened it. Only one page was written on. It showed a child's sketch, a crude drawing of a screaming figure strapped to the chair, with 4 dark silhouettes standing around it. At the bottom, scrawled in red ink that smelled like copper, was a name I recognized. Luca F. My name, again. And a date. Not today's. Not the day I was born. A future date exactly 1 year from now. The door slammed behind me. I spun around and was met with silence, save for a sudden scratching sound from inside the walls. It was rhythmic, methodical. A single knock, then 2, then silence. I backed into the farthest corner. The room dimmed. The candles flickered, revealing shadows that didn't match anything physical in the room. Something was coming. No awakening. And then I heard it again. That voice from before. This time it whispered, almost gently, "Sit. Remember. Let the others speak through you." I didn't want to sit. I didn't want to remember. But my legs were already moving. The moment I sat in the chair, I felt the air grow heavier, like I'd been submerged underwater. My ears popped. My spine locked. The cracked leather restraints, though long torn and useless, gripped my wrists as though they had a will of their own. They didn't tighten. They rested, as if waiting for something to begin. And then the voices started. Not loud, not screaming, just a low murmur, like dozens of people praying in reverse. Each syllable licked at my ears, my thoughts, the fibers of my memory. I couldn't recognize the language, but my body understood it. It wasn't meant to be spoken aloud, it was meant to invade. Images began to flicker across the room. Not hallucinations, projections. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, in a tattered hospital gown, sitting in this same chair. Her face calm, her lips stitched shut, for figures in crimson cloaks surrounded her. One held a book. One held a censer. One held a dagger. The fourth, the tallest, simply watched. I couldn't see his face, only the glint of something metallic beneath his hood. And then they chanted. A word I still can't pronounce, but its meaning was clear. Sacrifice. The girl didn't scream, but she bled. The projection flickered again. Another child. A boy this time. Same age. Same room. Same ritual. Same silence. And then another. And another. Dozens. Maybe more. Each child strapped to the same chair, each offered in some yearly rite, and each name, carved in the skin-bound book, matched with a corresponding symbol on the wall. When I turned my eyes upward, I saw them. Hundreds of glowing sigils, each twitching faintly, like they were breathing. And then I found mine. My symbol was new, still wet. It hadn't been there before. I couldn't speak. My tongue felt foreign in my mouth. But a question burned inside me. What was this vault for? Who ordered this? Why children? I got my answer from the walls. One of the shadows moved. It peeled itself from the brick, no longer a trick of the light, but a man-shaped presence. Not a ghost, not a demon, but something in between. It hovered at the edge of my vision, then whispered one sentence into my left ear. They are feeding him until he wakes. I wanted to vomit. I wanted to scream. I wanted to leave. But the door had vanished, and my body was no longer mine. I was part of something ancient, something institutional. This wasn't a rogue ritual. This was approved. This was Vatican sanctioned. And I knew then the children were not chosen randomly. We were bred. Bred for this vault. For this chair. For him. I closed my eyes. And when I opened them again, I was no longer alone in my body. I don't remember falling asleep. I don't remember dreaming. All I remember is waking up. Not in the usual way, not the slow re-entry into consciousness, but an abrupt switch like I had been rebooted. There was a coldness in my chest that wasn't there before, and an ache in my throat, like I had swallowed something alive. And something was whispering, not aloud. Inside, my thoughts were no longer just mine. I stood up, unsteady at first, and stared at the stone chair behind me. The leather straps were gone. So was the projection, the children, the sigils. Even the air had changed. It smelled like incense and rusted blood, and beneath it, something worse. A rot that no human had ever created. I was not in the same vault anymore. No longer a chamber with a door. This place had shifted. It had become a catacomb of arches, winding endlessly in every direction. The walls pulsed like muscle. The lights, once candles, were now flickering orbs suspended mid-air. As I walked, I noticed carvings under my feet, names etched in Latin, Greek, Hebrew, and something I couldn't recognize. And with each step, the whisper inside my skull grew clearer. It was him, not a demon, not a god, something between both, something older. He introduced himself not with words, but through memories that weren't mine. I saw monks slicing open their palms before entering the vault. I saw a cardinal collapse after reciting a forbidden litany. I saw a boy blonde, maybe 7, sink into the stone floor, smiling, as the others wept around him. And then I saw a name burned into my mind like a brand. St. Jude's Protocol. That was the official title. According to him, the Vatican's most elite inner circle, known only as the Last Watchers, had sealed him here centuries ago. But the seal was imperfect. It leaked. So every year, they fed him one soul pure, untouched, and preferably young. The cost of keeping the world normal, they believed, was measured in innocence. But he had grown stronger. The seal had worn thin. And now he had latched onto me. "You are not a prisoner," he said. "You are a doorway." That phrase shook me to the core. I wasn't the last child. I was the last passage. I stumbled forward, heart thundering. My feet moved without command. I found a chamber ahead, massive, domed, and completely silent. In its center floated a pulsing, obsidian egg-like structure, wrapped in chains of gold and bone. Latin verses spiraled across its surface like smoke. The voice in my head fell silent. And then, it opened its eye. Not metaphorically, not mystically. The thing inside the egg opened one massive vertical eye, and I felt every vein in my body respond. I wasn't just a vessel. I was a key, and I had just unlocked something that should never have been touched. It blinked. That eye, towering, lidless, and burning with concentric rings of gold, black, and violet, blinked once. And when it did, I felt a part of me dissolve. My knees buckled. The chains wrapped around the egg began to hum. Not vibrate, not rattle, hum, like a choir underwater, singing in reverse. Every note unlocked something, not just in the room but in me. My teeth clenched involuntarily as the air thickened. The smell of burning myrrh, blood, and something sour and mechanical filled my lungs. I turned to run, but the catacombs' doorways had vanished. The arches were now endless walls of glyphs, moving glyphs, twisting themselves like serpents in a frenzy. The whispers inside my skull turned into a roar, voices overlapping in every language I knew and many I didn't. They were not speaking to me. They were praying for me, and not the kind of prayer you want to hear. Suddenly, the orb cracked. Just a hairline fracture, but that was enough. A thin line of crimson light spilled out, casting a beam directly onto my chest. The pain was instant. My ribcage seized up, my eyes swelled with tears, and my vision blurred. When I looked down, I saw symbols scorched into my shirt, branding themselves onto my skin beneath. They matched the ones from the vault door, the ones the priest had drawn before sending me inside. That's when I realized I had been prepared for this, not just chosen, designed, born for it. I had flashes again, more memories not mine. Lab-like rooms beneath monasteries. Ultrasound scans labeled with Vatican seals. Women in surgical gowns, sobbing. My father's hands covered in ash as he whispered Latin lullabies into my infant ears. This wasn't a punishment. It was a prophecy. My body collapsed, but my consciousness remained upright. I saw myself from above. The eye glared at both versions of me, physical and spiritual, and then did something impossible. Spoke my name. Not just the name my parents gave me. The first name. The original one. The one hidden in Vatican records never meant to be spoken aloud. And hearing it unlocked the last seal. The egg exploded, not violently, not loudly. It unraveled like time itself was peeling back. A rift opened, circular and glowing, and through it I saw him. Not just the eye now, but limbs, wings, mouths, and symbols floating in empty space. It wasn't a demon. It wasn't an angel. It was the waiting one. He didn't crawl through the rift. He bled into the world, one word at a time. And as his essence entered, I felt mine leave. Not death, not possession. It was merging. And when I looked into the reflective wall behind me, I didn't see myself anymore. I saw the child that entered, and the God that would leave. I came to in the same vault, though everything around me had changed. The marble floor was no longer cracked. It was molten. Not fire, but memory. It shifted beneath my feet, replaying images like reflections in a warped mirror. The other children who had entered before me. I watched them cry, scream, some pray, some simply sit and go silent. None of them had survived this long. All of them had been swallowed whole. But I hadn't been consumed. I had been prepared. Etched into the stone beneath me were the names of the 9 children who had entered before. Some were still glowing faintly. A 10th name had just been added. Mine. But there was a space next to it, another blank groove half-carved. Something inside me knew what that meant. This wasn't the end of the ritual. I was just the penultimate key. A high-pitched ringing echoed around the chamber. I turned, and to my horror, I saw the priest who had led me here, the one who had wept at the threshold, standing beside the rift. Except it wasn't him anymore. His robes hung limp, his face had cracked like porcelain, and from within the hollow shell, something else peered out. Something ancient, familiar. Your purpose is almost fulfilled, it whispered. Its voice was layered: child, man, woman, beast, all at once. But one final gate remains. I stepped back instinctively, but the vault wouldn't let me retreat. The glyphs on the wall ignited again, blazing with red heat, reacting to the being's presence. The air turned sharp and electric. "You are not the first vessel," it said. "But you are the most stable." I clenched my fists. "Who are you?" The entity tilted the priest's hollow head. "I am the custodian, the one who guides the 12th. It pointed toward the rift, which had widened into a full archway now, revealing an infinite corridor made of bone, fire, and screaming echoes. Inside, I glimpsed machines, living ones, devouring books, rewriting scrolls, branding names into unborn flesh. "That is the archive," it continued, "where the real list is kept, not of who enters the vault, but of who makes it out." And then it said something that turned my blood to ice. "Your father knew." I stared. "He was the 11th, the custodian added. "He passed the seed to you, unknowingly or not. His body was taken, but his soul remains caged within the rift." My legs gave way. My father had been part of this? I saw a new vision flash before me. My father's final days. The fever, the fits, the cryptic things he whispered. "They're calling," he once said. "You'll hear them soon too." I thought he was losing his mind. But he wasn't. He was remembering. The custodian moved toward me slowly. "You are the only one to have survived both inheritance and initiation. The Vatican does not know yet, but they will. And when they come, you must choose. Seal the vault forever or open the archive." It extended a burned, skeletal hand. In its palm was a small glass orb, swirling with black smoke. "The archive key," it said. I reached for it. The moment I touched it, every scream from inside the rift went silent. I had accepted, and the vault began to shift again. Walls rearranging, doors manifesting, corridors stretching. The next phase had begun. The moment I stepped out of the vault, I knew they were already watching me. The sunlight above ground felt artificial, like a light turned on for interrogation. I emerged not into the church where I had first entered, but into a hidden courtyard deep within Vatican grounds. One I had never seen before, and one I suspect very few ever had. The symbols on the floor beneath my feet matched the glyphs inside the vault. I hadn't truly left. I had simply advanced to a different level of the same game. And the game had players I couldn't yet see. The Vatican guards didn't greet me. Instead, 5 figures in crimson robes stood silently, each with a white mask bearing a different Roman numeral. I recognized the symbol etched into the robes, Ordo Tertius Oculis, the Order of the Third Eye. I'd found fragments of their name in forbidden texts in my father's hidden archives. Supposedly disbanded in the 1700s, they were the Vatican's internal enforcers of supernatural anomalies. If they were here, it meant they knew something had broken protocol. They didn't speak, just scanned me. One of them removed a golden relic from his sleeve and pressed it against my chest. The relic hissed. They all flinched. One of them spoke for the first time. "Confirmed. He's carrying the key." Their leader turned toward a marble wall that shimmered faintly and placed his palm flat against it. A concealed door groaned open, revealing a narrow spiral staircase lit only by flame. I followed without question. Downward again. Always downward. The chamber I was taken to resembled nothing I had seen before. High arched ceilings formed a dome of stained glass, but not of saints or angels. These depicted fire, blood, creatures with eyes where no eyes should be. At the center of the room was a black stone slab with chains wrapped tightly around it. Seated at the far end, behind a veil of incense and candlelight, was an old woman. Her robes were simple, but her presence eclipsed the masked figures. They bowed to her before disappearing, sealing the door behind them. "You are number 12, she said. Her voice was clear and cold. I nodded. "You activated the vault key." I said nothing. "You must now understand the stakes." She stood and walked toward me. Her hands, though frail, held a familiar item, my father's crucifix. "We recovered this from the 11th before he vanished." "I thought he died," I whispered. She stared through me. "No one dies in the vault. They become part of it." She handed me the crucifix. It burned my palm, but not from heat, from recognition. Inside the crucifix, tucked behind the wooden inlay, was a microfilm strip. I hadn't seen one in years. She nodded for me to view it. The footage that played was shaky, old, clearly recorded in secret. It showed my father, younger, tied to the same slab in the chamber. He was screaming, not from pain, but from warning. "They're feeding it," he cried. "Not locking it away. The vault isn't a prison. It's an altar." The recording ended. The woman sat again. "You now know too much," she said. "And yet, you may be our only hope." I didn't ask what it was. Deep down, I already knew. The vault wasn't meant to keep something out. It was designed to keep something in, and the ritual of the 12 was about to complete its final phase. Whatever was inside was waking up. I didn't sleep that night. Not in the candle-lit chamber. Not under the eyes of the Order. Not after seeing my father's face in the film, warped with desperation, pleading for a truth that no one had ever wanted to accept. The Order left me with books, ancient texts, hand-copied, each marked with the same sigil burned into my wrist back in the vault. The sigil of the 12th cycle. I thought it was a mark of passage. It wasn't. It was a timer. The old woman returned in the morning, dressed now in silver robes. The shift wasn't symbolic. It was procedural. The silver vestments were only worn during rituals of containment. "You don't have long," she told me, laying a single candle beside my bed. "You have until this burns out." "Until what?" I asked. "Until the vault opens again." She didn't need to explain. I could feel it too. The walls of the Vatican were vibrating, not physically, but psychically, like something behind them was pushing forward with every breath. The symbols I had once seen carved into marble now appeared faintly on my skin. Not burned, branded from within. And in my sleep, I dreamed of 12 children, standing in a circle beneath the Vatican, each chanting in a forgotten tongue. One by one, their mouths stitched shut by invisible thread as they vanished into darkness. All except one. That one was me. I asked the Order for the names of the previous 11. They refused. So I took it myself. I returned to the archive corridor near the vault, this time escorted by 2 masked figures who called themselves simply archivists. In the third drawer, beneath parchment worn thinner than rice paper, was a list. Giovanni A. 1891. Elias D. 1903. Tomas M. 1915. Beatrice H. 1928. Samuel K. 1940. Clara V. 1954. Jamil R. 1968. Amara S. 1981. Daniel C. 1995. Malachi N. 2008. Elias D. 2. 2020. Blank. There was my father's name. Twice. The Order had lied. No one escaped the vault. Except maybe him. When I confronted the woman again, she finally spoke the truth. "The ritual failed during the 11th cycle," she said. "Your father broke the binding. Something got out." I asked, "What got out?" She closed her eyes. "Not a demon. Not a ghost. A memory." And then I understood. The vault didn't contain a creature. It contained consciousness. A will so ancient, so embedded in time, that it could inhabit bloodlines, attach itself to souls like mine. The children weren't sacrifices. They were vessels. And now that all 12 seals were broken, that consciousness, whatever it was looking for form. It would use me, unless I used it first. The night before the vault opened again, I wrote a letter. I didn't know who would read it, maybe no one. Maybe someone years from now in the aftermath. I didn't write it for the church or the Order, or even for the other children whose names had faded from Vatican records like ghosts behind fogged glass. I wrote it for the part of me that still believed in choice, in defiance, in free will, because if what they said was true, if I was the 12th and final vessel, then when I stepped inside that vault again, I wouldn't be walking in as a sacrifice. I'd be walking in as a weapon. They dressed me in white this time, not silver, not black. White robes with crimson thread woven into a spiral down my spine. The pattern was familiar. It had appeared in my dreams, carved into the ceiling of the vault. I knew what it meant now. spiral of becoming. It was not a symbol of death. It was a symbol of transformation. The vault's doors were already ajar when I arrived. The archivists no longer held torches. The chamber glowed on its own now, alive, breathing, and something had changed inside. The air was heavier, not just with age or dust, but with intention. 12 concentric rings now pulsed faintly on the floor. At the center, an empty stone pedestal, cracked, as if it had once supported something far too heavy to carry. A heart? A soul? A name? And on the walls, I saw the truth I had feared since the beginning. Not paintings, not warnings, mirrors, dozens of them, each one showing not a reflection but a version of me. Older, younger, some scarred, some laughing, one of them with no eyes, another mouthing words silently. Let me out. I stepped into the center. The doors sealed behind me. The room did not shake. There was no explosion, no grand, cinematic rupture of light or voice or thunder. There was only whispering, 12 voices, and then one, mine, but not mine. I was born 12 times, it said, speaking inside my chest. Each time weaker, each time closer. You were not meant to survive the becoming. I asked it what it wanted. It didn't answer. It just remembered. Images flooded through me. Elias, my father, kneeling in blood beside a broken seal. Beatrice burning a book she had memorized. Malachi pulling his own teeth out in the dark. A lineage of pain and memory, each child not erased but compiled. I am not a god, the voice finally said. I am what you forgot. I am the church's first sin. And then the mirrors shattered. The symbols peeled off the walls like dead skin. The light in the room inverted, turning the shadows to flame. And I was gone. For me, it felt like blinking. But when I stepped out again, the world had changed. There were no archivists, no order, no church, just sky and silence and ash. At my feet lay the 13th name, carved into stone. Mine.